The city pulsed with restless energy under a sky bruised with heavy clouds, the kind that promised a storm but held back just to torment. Alex navigated the late-night streets, his car's headlights slicing through the urban haze, his heart lighter than it had been in months. For once, work had cut him loose early, an unexpected gift from a last-minute schedule change. No all-nighter, no grinding through reports until dawn. By 11 p.m., he was free, a rare grin tugging at his lips as he imagined Claire's face when he walked through the door hours before she expected him. He could already see her eyes widen, her smile breaking through that tired, guarded expression she wore when she thought he'd be gone until morning. The thought pushed his foot harder on the gas, the engine's hum matching the buzz of anticipation in his chest. He stopped at a corner store, the fluorescent lights harsh against the night's gloom. A bottle of Merlot, her favorite, and a bouquet of lilies, their petals soft and fragrant, felt like the perfect touch to elevate the evening. Nothing extravagant, just a gesture to say, "I'm here, and tonight's ours." He clutched the flowers tightly, their scent mingling with the crisp air as he stepped back into the night, his mind spinning with plans for a quiet, intimate evening. Maybe they'd watch one of those old movies she loved, or just talk, really talk, like they used to before life got so heavy. But as he turned onto their street, a shadow crept into his thoughts. The driveway loomed ahead, empty. Claire's car was gone. The house sat dark, its windows like hollow eyes staring back at him. A faint unease coiled in his gut, slithering upward until it tightened around his chest. He tried to dismiss it. Maybe she'd popped out for groceries, or to grab a late coffee. She did that sometimes, didn't she? But the silence of the house felt wrong, heavy, like it was holding its breath. He parked, grabbed the wine and flowers, and stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots, each step amplifying the quiet. Inside, the darkness was suffocating. No hum of the TV, no clatter of dishes, no soft footsteps padding across the hardwood. Just an eerie stillness that pressed against his eardrums. "Claire," he called, his voice swallowed by the void. No answer. He flicked on the light, half expecting to see her curled up on the couch, asleep with a book in her lap. But the living room was empty, the air stale, untouched. His pulse quickened, a faint throb at his temples. Where the hell was she? He set the wine and flowers on the kitchen counter, the lily's petals trembling slightly as they landed. Pulling out his phone, he dialed her number, his fingers tapping in impatient rhythm on the counter. The line rang once, twice, then connected. "Alex." Her voice was flat, clipped, like she was annoyed to hear from him. No warmth, no surprise, just a cold edge that made his skin prickle. "Hey, Claire, where are you? I got off early, thought I'd surprise you." He forced a smile into his voice, clinging to the excitement he'd felt moments ago. But the pause that followed was too long, too heavy, like the moment before a guillotine drops. "I'm not coming home tonight," she said, her tone sharp, dismissive. "I've got some urgent work to deal with. Don't bother me, okay? I'll be back tomorrow." The line went dead before he could respond, the silence roaring back louder than before. Alex stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, her words echoing in his skull. Not coming home. His mind scrambled for an explanation, but none fit. Urgent work? At this hour? Claire was meticulous, a planner. She'd have mentioned something like this. And that tone, so cold, so unlike her. His stomach twisted, a sickening dread pooling inside him. He lowered the phone, staring at the screen as if it might offer answers. His thumb hovered over the call button, tempted to dial again, to demand clarity, but something stopped him. The flowers on the counter mocked him, their brightness a cruel contrast to the darkness settling over his thoughts. He paced the kitchen, the tiles cold beneath his feet. What the hell is going on? Claire had never spoken to him like that, never brushed him off with such icy detachment. His excitement curdled into something sharper, hotter, anger. His grip tightened on the phone, knuckles whitening. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, his voice low, venomous. "Why are you treating me like this, Claire?" The empty house offered no response, just the faint hum of the fridge and the distant wail of a siren outside. He sank into a chair at the kitchen table, staring at the driveway through the window. The absence of her car gnawed at him, a tangible reminder of her absence. His mind raced, conjuring scenarios. Maybe she was stuck at the office, maybe there was a crisis. But the coldness in her voice, the way she'd shut him out, didn't align with any innocent explanation. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and he wasn't going to let it slide. The night stretched on, each minute dragging like a blade across his nerves. He didn't sleep, couldn't. The wine sat unopened, the lilies wilting slightly at the edges. By morning, his jaw ached from clenching, his eyes burning from staring into the dark. When he heard the crunch of tires on gravel, he straightened, his pulse spiking. Claire was back. She walked in, her movements casual, almost defiant, as if the previous night's call had never happened. Her hair was slightly mussed, her coat slung over one arm. "Morning," she said, her voice light, breezy, like she was commenting on the weather. She barely glanced at him before heading for the stairs. "I'm going to shower." Alex's frustration ignited, a slow burn flaring into something fiercer. "That's it?" he called after her, his voice sharp enough to cut through her nonchalance. She paused, one hand on the banister, but didn't turn. "You disappear all night. Don't tell me where you're going. And now you just stroll in like nothing happened?" She sighed, a sound heavy with irritation, and finally faced him. Her eyes were guarded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Alex, I told you. Work. It was urgent. Can we not do this right now?" She turned away again, dismissing him as if he were a child throwing a tantrum. His hands clenched into fists, nails biting into his palms. "Work," he repeated, his voice low, dangerous. "You expect me to believe that?" She didn't respond, just continued up the stairs, the sound of her footsteps fading. The shower hissed to life moments later, and Alex sat there, the silence pressing in again, heavier now, laced with betrayal. Something in his gut screamed at him to move, to act. He couldn't just sit there, stewing in her lies. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside, the morning air sharp against his skin. Claire's car sat in the driveway, still warm from the drive. He hesitated, then opened the driver's side door and slid inside. The familiar scent of her perfume lingered, but it felt tainted now, like a memory gone sour. His eyes scanned the interior, landing on her tablet wedged between the seats. She used it for navigation, always had. With a trembling hand, he powered it on, the screen glowing to life. He scrolled through her recent destinations, his heart pounding louder with each swipe. One address stood out, stark and unfamiliar, 251 Oakwood Drive. A quiet neighborhood across the city, nowhere near her office. The timestamp showed she'd been there last night, parked for hours. His breath hitched, a cold sweat breaking out across his skin. What could she possibly have been doing there all night? He opened the glove compartment, not sure what he was looking for, but driven by a desperate need for answers. His fingers brushed against something small, smooth, a box. He pulled it out, his heart stopping as he read the label. An open box of condoms, one missing. The world tilted. They hadn't used condoms in years. There was no reason for this to be in her car, no innocent explanation. His hands went numb, the box slipping from his fingers as his mind pieced together a truth he didn't want to face. Back inside, the shower was still running, the sound a distant drone. Alex sat at the kitchen table, staring at the floor, the box of condoms burning a hole in his thoughts. Claire's casual dismissal, her coldness on the phone, the address across town. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. She wasn't just hiding something. She was betraying him, and she didn't even care enough to cover her tracks properly. When Claire finally came downstairs, her hair damp, wrapped in a towel, she looked relaxed, almost smug. She barely acknowledged him, grabbing a mug from the cabinet like it was just another morning. But when her eyes met his, she froze, catching the steel in his gaze. "What?" she snapped, already defensive, her tone daring him to challenge her. "We need to talk," Alex said, his voice low, controlled, but laced with a cold fury that made her pause. He held up her car keys, the metal glinting in the morning light. "Where were you last night, Claire? And don't lie to me." Her face darkened, her lips twisting into a scowl. "What the hell, Alex? Were you digging through my car? Going through my stuff?" Her voice was sharp, accusatory, as if he were the one who'd crossed a line. "Just answer the question," he shot back, his patience fraying. "Who lives at 251 Oakwood Drive? Why were you there all night?" His voice rose, the anger he'd held back now seeping through, raw and unfiltered. For a fleeting moment, something flickered in her eyes, guilt, defiance, fear, he couldn't tell. But she straightened, crossing her arms, her expression hardening into something unreadable. "It's Dave's house," she said flatly, her voice devoid of emotion. "From the office. I stayed there." Alex's stomach plummeted, the air sucked from his lungs. Dave, her coworker. The name hit like a punch, sharp and brutal. "You think I'm an idiot, Claire," he said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You spend the night at another man's house, and I find condoms in your car, condoms we don't use, and you expect me to believe nothing happened?" Her eyes narrowed, her face a mask of defiance. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice steady, almost mocking in its calm. "Dave isn't my lover." "Then what is it?" Alex roared, his control slipping. "Is he your lover, Claire? Just tell me the truth." His fists clenched, his entire body taut with the effort to keep from exploding. She took a deep breath, her posture shifting, her arms dropping to her sides. The irritation melted from her face, replaced by a chilling calm that sent a shiver down his spine. "I had problems at work," she said, her voice eerily even. "Dave helped cover for me with our bosses. If he hadn't, I could have lost my job. I went to his place to thank him." Alex's blood ran cold, his mind struggling to process her words. "To thank him," he repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. "What? So you slept with him as a thank you?" Her expression didn't waver, her eyes locked on his with unnerving clarity. "Yes," she said simply, the word a blade slicing through him. "It wasn't cheating, Alex. It was a transaction. No emotions, just honesty. I knew he was attracted to me, and I showed him my appreciation." The room spun, the air thick with the weight of her confession. Alex stared at her, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. "You're telling me you sold yourself for your career?" His voice was barely above a whisper, each word heavy with disgust and betrayal. Claire didn't flinch. She met his gaze, unapologetic, her voice steady as stone. "I offered him a moment of happiness in exchange for his help. That's all it was, Alex. A professional courtesy." The words hit like a sledgehammer, shattering the last fragments of the life he thought they had. She stood there, calm, composed, as if she'd just explained something as mundane as a business deal. The lilies on the counter, the wine, the plans for a quiet night together. It all felt like a cruel joke now. His hands shook, his vision blurring with rage and pain. Claire thought she could dismiss this, that her cold, calculated betrayal was something he'd just accept. But she was wrong, dead wrong. As the silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating, Alex made a vow to himself. If Claire thought she could play him for a fool, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. He'd play her game for now, let her think she was in control. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The morning sun clawed through the blinds, casting jagged shadows across the kitchen where Alex sat, his coffee untouched, growing cold. Claire's words from the previous day echoed in his mind, each syllable a fresh wound, a professional courtesy. The phrase was obscene, a sterile mask for her betrayal, and it fueled a fire in him that burned hotter with every passing hour. She'd stood there, unrepentant, her eyes cold as she reduced their marriage to a transaction. The lilies he'd brought home, now drooping on the counter, seemed to mock him, their faded petals a silent testament to the life he thought they'd shared. Claire moved through the house like a ghost, her presence a quiet taunt. She poured herself a coffee, her movements deliberate, as if daring him to reignite the argument. But Alex held his tongue, his jaw tight, his mind already shifting to something colder, sharper, retribution. He'd play the part of the forgiving husband, let her believe she'd smooth things over with her calculated charm. But beneath his calm exterior, a plan was taking shape, one that would unravel her carefully constructed world as thoroughly as she'd shattered his. "I'm heading to work," Claire said, breaking the silence. Her voice was casual, as if the previous night's confession was a minor hiccup already forgotten. She grabbed her bag, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she moved toward the door. No apology, no glance back, just the same infuriating nonchalance. Alex nodded, forcing a neutral tone. "Have a good day." The words tasted bitter, but he delivered them with practiced ease. She paused briefly, her eyes flickering with something, suspicion, perhaps, before she stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind her. The moment she was gone, he exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough to let him think clearly. He needed to act fast, to set the stage before she sensed anything amiss. He pulled out his phone and began his research, fingers flying across the screen as he searched for the perfect tool to execute his plan. After an hour of digging, he found it. A local group of event planners who specialized in elaborate public stunts, flash mobs, pranks, carefully orchestrated chaos. Their website boasted videos of crowds erupting into choreographed dances, strangers delivering cryptic messages, scenes designed to shock and disorient. It was perfect. He sent a message, outlining his request in vague terms, enough to pique their interest without revealing too much. Within an hour, he had a response. Meet us at the Grindstone Cafe, 2 p.m. We're intrigued. The cafe was tucked in a quiet corner of the city, its dim lighting and low hum of conversation offering a discreet backdrop. Alex arrived early, choosing a table in the back, his nerves taut but his resolve unshaken. When the team arrived, 3 young planners, their faces alight with creative mischief, he felt a spark of confidence. They were exactly what he needed, sharp, inventive, and unafraid to push boundaries. So, said Mia, the group's leader, leaning forward with a sly grin, you want us to stage something personal, something to shake someone up, make them question everything. Am I reading that right? Alex nodded, his voice low but firm. Exactly. I need it subtle but sharp. Something that hits her where it hurts, her reputation, her confidence, without crossing into anything too overt. It needs to feel like her secrets are spilling out, like the world's closing in, but she can't pin it on anyone. Mia exchanged a glance with her partners, a spark of excitement in her eyes. We've done stunts like this before. Public scenes that look spontaneous but hit like a gut punch. Tell us about her. What's her routine? Where's she vulnerable? Alex leaned in, detailing Claire's habits. Her daily stop at Brood Awakening, the cafe near her office, for a latte and croissant. Her obsession with her career, the polished image she projected at work, the way she prided herself on control, on always having the upper hand. He didn't mention the betrayal outright, but the edge in his voice betrayed his pain. The planners didn't pry. They didn't need to. They saw the fire in his eyes and understood the stakes. We can work with this, said Ethan, the group's tech specialist, scribbling notes. A series of encounters, each one escalating, each one chipping away at her. Strangers dropping hints, comments that cut too close to home. By the end, she'll feel like her world's unraveling, but she won't know why or how. Keep it classy, Alex warned. No violence, nothing illegal. Just unforgettable. Mia smirked, already sketching ideas. Trust us, we've got this. She'll be looking over her shoulder for weeks. By Monday, Alex's plan was in motion. He'd secured an airtight alibi, a business trip to the company's production site in the next city. He'd pitched it to his boss, Bob, with just the right mix of enthusiasm and nonchalance. A chance to inspect the site, clear my head, get some perspective. Bob had agreed without hesitation, signing off on the paperwork that same afternoon. The trip was legitimate, documented, untouchable. No one would question his absence. Claire saw him off that morning, her demeanor softened, almost warm, as if their confrontation had never happened. A whole week, huh? She said, leaning against the doorframe. Her smile practiced but convincing. I'll miss you, but work's work, right? Right, Alex replied, his voice steady, betraying nothing. He kissed her cheek, the gesture mechanical, and headed for his car, the weight of his plans settling comfortably in his chest. She had no idea what was coming. Across town, Claire began her day as usual, oblivious to the storm gathering around her. Brood Awakening was crowded, the air thick with the scent of espresso and warm pastries. She stepped up to the counter, ordering her usual latte and croissant, savoring the familiarity of the routine. The barista slid her cup across the counter, and she reached for it, her mind already drifting to the day's tasks. A man in a tailored suit appeared beside her, his presence sudden, jarring. He glanced at her, his eyes narrowing with a flicker of recognition, then offered a smile that was all teeth, no warmth. You're Claire, right? He said, his voice smooth but laced with something unsettling. I've heard about you. So generous, thanking your colleagues in intimate ways. Very considerate. Claire froze, her hand hovering over her cup. Her heart stuttered, a cold flush spreading through her. Excuse me, she stammered, her voice thin, unsteady. Who are you? The man chuckled, a low, mocking sound that made her skin crawl. Just someone who knows a giver when he sees one. Not everyone's so accommodating with their coworkers. He tipped his head, almost a bow, and slipped into the crowd before she could respond, leaving her rooted to the spot. Her pulse raced, her mind scrambling to make sense of his words. It had to be a mistake, a case of mistaken identity. She grabbed her coffee, the cup burning against her palm, and hurried out, the cafe's warmth suddenly stifling. The man's voice lingered, his words looping in her head, sharp and insinuating. How could he know? No one knew about Dave, no one except. She shook her head, forcing the thought away. It was a fluke, a random creep saying something to get a reaction. It didn't mean anything. But the next morning, the unease returned, sharper now, like a blade pressed against her nerves. She hesitated before entering Brood Awakening, her eyes scanning the crowd for the man in the suit. He wasn't there, but the feeling of being watched clung to her like damp cloth. She placed her order, her hands unsteady, and waited, her gaze darting to every face in the room. An older gentleman approached, his suit impeccable, his smile warm but unsettlingly knowing. "My dear," he said, his voice rich with false admiration, "I've heard of your generosity. Sacrificing so much for your career, truly inspiring." He leaned closer, his eyes glinting. Not many would go to such lengths. Claire's breath caught, her stomach lurching. "What are you talking about?" she managed, her voice barely audible. Her hands trembled as she gripped her coffee, the liquid sloshing against the lid. "Oh, don't be modest," the man said, waving a hand dismissively. "Word gets around about people like you. So selfless." He nodded, as if approving, and shuffled off, leaving her standing in a haze of shock and dread. She stumbled out of the cafe, her heart hammering, her mind spiraling. This wasn't a coincidence. Two strangers, 2 days in a row, both making cryptic, humiliating comments about that night. Her secret, the one she'd buried deep, was somehow leaking out, spreading like poison. But how? Dave was the only one who knew, and even he wouldn't be foolish enough to talk, not when it could cost him his job, too. Would he? By midweek, Claire was a wreck, her nerves frayed to the point of snapping. She told herself the encounters were random, meaningless, but the doubt gnawed at her, relentless. She avoided the cafe's counter on Wednesday, opting for a quick grab-and-go, but the moment she stepped outside, a young woman bumped into her, nearly spilling her coffee. "Oh, you're Claire, right?" the girl said, her voice bright, almost playful. "My friend works with you. Says you're so caring, especially to the guys at the office." She winked, a knowing glint in her eyes, and added, "Thanks for being so generous." Claire's breath hitched, her vision blurring with panic. She grabbed her coffee and fled, her heels clicking frantically against the pavement. This wasn't random anymore. Someone knew, someone was spreading her secret, twisting it into something sordid, public. Her phone felt like a brick in her hand as she dialed Alex, her voice trembling as she poured out her fear. "Alex, something's wrong. Strangers, they're saying things about me, about that night. It's like they know everything." His response was sharp, cutting through her desperation. "Claire, why are you bringing this up again? I thought we moved past this. You're paranoid." He sighed, exasperated, and switched to a video call. The screen showed him walking through a noisy factory floor, a hard hat on his head, his face focused. "See? I'm working, Claire. I've let it go. Why can't you?" "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. It's strange. I don't understand. I don't have time for this," he snapped, his tone final. "Don't call unless it's important." The call ended, leaving her staring at a blank screen, her heart sinking. Alone in her office, Claire's mind churned. If Alex wasn't behind this, and his video call seemed to prove he was miles away, then who was? The only other person who knew was Dave. A cold realization settled over her, heavy and suffocating. Had he betrayed her? Had he let something slip? Or worse, spread the story deliberately? Her hands shook as she grabbed her purse, her decision made. She needed to confront him, to demand answers before this spiraled further out of control. She marched down the hall to Dave's office, her heart pounding, her anger a live wire. He was at his desk, typing, oblivious to the storm about to break. She closed the door behind her, the click loud in the quiet room. "Dave," she hissed, her voice low but trembling with fury. "Did you tell anyone about us?" About that night. He looked up, his face paling, his eyes wide with confusion. Claire, what? No, I'd never. Why would you think that? Don't lie to me, she snapped, leaning closer, her voice a venomous whisper. People are talking, Dave. Strangers. They know things they shouldn't. If management finds out, we're both done. You know the rules. Dave's hands shot up, defensive, his voice shaky. Claire, I swear, I haven't said a word. I wouldn't risk my career, or yours. You have to believe me. She studied him, searching for a crack in his expression, a hint of deceit. But all she saw was fear, raw and genuine. Her anger faltered, replaced by a creeping paranoia. If Dave wasn't talking, then who was? And how did they know? The walls of his office seemed to close in, the air thick with her own panic. Someone was playing a cruel game, and she was trapped in the center, her secret exposed, her control slipping away with every passing day. The city hummed with its usual chaos, but for Claire, the world had narrowed to a suffocating tunnel of dread. Each step she took toward her office felt like wading through quicksand, her nerves frayed to threads, her mind a tangle of fear and suspicion. The encounters at the cafe, those strangers with their knowing smiles and barbed words, had burrowed into her psyche, gnawing at her sanity. By Thursday, she was a shadow of herself, her eyes darting to every passerby, every whisper in the office sounding like an accusation. She hadn't slept properly in days, her nights haunted by the echo of those voices, their insinuations wrapping around her like chains. How do they know? The question pulsed in her skull, relentless, unanswered. She avoided brewed awakening that morning, opting to brew coffee at home, the bitter taste doing little to steady her trembling hands. The office was her last refuge, a place where she could bury herself in work, pretend the world wasn't tilting beneath her feet. But even there, the air felt charged, the glances of her coworkers too sharp, too curious. She sat at her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, trying to focus on a report that blurred into nonsense. The usual office chatter, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, sounded distant, muffled by the roar of her own thoughts. An hour into the morning, the door swung open, and a courier strode in, his presence slicing through the room's hum. He carried a massive bouquet of red roses, their petals vivid against the drab office walls, drawing every eye like a spotlight. Claire's stomach lurched as she sensed what was coming, a sick premonition tightening her chest. The courier scanned the room, his voice loud and deliberate. Delivery for Claire Thompson. The words hit like a thunderclap. Heads turned, colleagues pausing mid-task, their curiosity palpable. Claire stood, her legs unsteady, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. I didn't order anything, she said, her voice sharp, edged with panic. Why are these for me? The courier shrugged, unfazed, and pulled a small card from the bouquet. He cleared his throat, his voice carrying across the room, each word a nail in her unraveling composure. For the enchanting Claire, who made my night unforgettable. Signed, Dave. A stunned silence blanketed the office, broken only by a few stifled giggles and hushed whispers. Claire's face drained of color, her breath shallow as the room spun. The card's words echoed in her head, each syllable a fresh wound. Dave. Her colleagues' eyes bored into her, some amused, others judgmental, their murmurs growing louder, a chorus of speculation. She felt exposed, raw, as if her skin had been peeled back to reveal the shame beneath. This is a mistake, she stammered, her voice trembling as she stepped toward the courier. I didn't. Why would he? Her words faltered, her hands shaking as she reached for the bouquet, desperate to make it disappear. But her fingers brushed the roses, and in a surge of fury and humiliation, she knocked the bouquet to the floor. Petals scattered across the carpet, their crimson stark against the gray, a chaotic mirror of her fracturing mind. What kind of sick joke is this? She screamed, her voice raw, cracking under the weight of her rage. Who sent these? The courier backed away, his hands raised, his expression a mix of confusion and unease. I'm just the delivery guy, ma'am. I don't know anything. He edged toward the door, clearly eager to escape the storm he'd unwittingly unleashed. Claire's colleagues watched, some smirking, others wide-eyed, as her outburst filled the room. Claire, relax, said Sarah, a coworker with a barely concealed grin. stepping forward as if to calm her. But the amusement in her eyes only fueled Claire's panic, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The whispers grew louder, a venomous hum that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. She's losing it. Did she really sleep with Dave? What's going on? The door to the boss's office swung open, and Mr. White strode out, his face a mask of concern and irritation. He surveyed the scene, the scattered roses, the retreating courier, Claire trembling in the center of it all, and his voice cut through the chaos. What in God's name is happening here? His gaze darted to the card, still clutched in Claire's hand, and he plucked it from her fingers, scanning it quickly. His expression darkened, his eyes narrowing as they met hers. Claire, what is this? Can you explain? She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat, tangled in a web of fear and shame. It's not. It's a setup, she managed, her voice shaking, barely convincing even to herself. I didn't do anything. Someone's trying to ruin me. Mr. White's brow furrowed, his patience visibly thinning. This behavior isn't rational, Claire. If Dave sent these, if there's something going on between you two, I need to know. Now. His tone was stern, his eyes searching hers for answers she couldn't give. No, she cried, her voice breaking. It's not true. I would never. But her words dissolved into a sob, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The room seemed to close in, the faces of her colleagues blurring into a gallery of judgment and mockery. She could hear their whispers, feel their stares, each one a blade twisting deeper into her chest. Mr. White sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose, his voice softening but firm. Claire, you need to calm down. This is disrupting the entire office. He glanced at the scattered roses, then back at her, his expression a mix of pity and suspicion. Why don't you take a couple of days off? We'll sort this out. Maybe you and Dave can clear the air. Maybe even a lie detector test to keep things transparent. He chuckled, clearly trying to lighten the mood, but the suggestion landed like a spark on dry tinder. Something inside Claire snapped, the pressure of the week exploding in a white-hot surge of rage and despair. Yes, I slept with Dave, she screamed, her voice raw, echoing off the walls. The office fell silent, the air thick with shock. I rode him like a goddamn stallion, and I enjoyed every second of it. And all of you. She spun, her gaze sweeping over her stunned colleagues, her face flushed with fury. You're just miserable vultures, desperate to tear into someone else's life because yours are so pathetic. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by a stunned hush. Claire's chest heaved, tears streaming down her face as the weight of her words crashed over her. She'd said it, out loud, to everyone. The secret she'd guarded, the one she'd thought was hers alone, was now a public spectacle. Her colleagues stared, some wide-eyed, others smirking, their whispers resuming with renewed fervor. She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped it, and stormed toward the door, her sobs choking the air. Just as she reached the exit, she collided with Dave, who had just returned from an off-site meeting, his face bright with his usual confidence. But as he took in her tear-streaked face, the scattered roses, the stunned office, his expression crumbled. Claire, what's going on? He asked, his voice unsteady, his eyes darting around the room. Tell them, she shouted, her voice thick with anguish. Tell them about us, Dave. About how we rolled around at your place. They're all dying to know, aren't they? Because their lives are so damn boring. Dave's face went ashen, his knees buckling slightly as he struggled to process her words. Claire, why? Why would you say that? He stammered, his voice barely audible. That was supposed to be our secret. Mr. White stepped forward, his expression now cold, unyielding. So it's true, he said, his voice like ice. There is something going on between you two. Dave's eyes dropped to the floor, his shoulders slumping. I didn't tell anyone, he mumbled, his voice hollow. I swear I didn't. Mr. White exhaled sharply, his frustration palpable. That's enough, he said, his tone final. Dave in my office. Now. He turned to the rest of the staff, his voice sharp. Everyone, back to work. This isn't a soap opera. As Dave followed Mr. White, his head bowed, the office erupted into murmurs, colleagues exchanging glances and hushed comments. Claire's outburst had turned her secret into a scandal, the kind that would linger in the office's collective memory for years. She stood frozen at the door, her purse clutched to her chest, her world crumbling around her. The roses lay scattered at her feet, their petals crushed, a vivid reminder of the wreckage she'd created or that someone had orchestrated for her. Across town, Alex sat in a sterile conference room at the production site, his phone buzzing with a text from Mia. First phase complete. She's rattled. Escalating tomorrow. A faint smile tugged at his lips, cold and calculated. Claire thought she could betray him and walk away unscathed, but she was wrong. He'd let her believe she was in control, let her think her confession had smoothed things over. But every step she took was on a path he'd laid, each encounter a carefully placed trap. She was unraveling, just as he'd planned, and he was nowhere near done. Claire, meanwhile, stumbled out of the office, the cool air hitting her like a slap. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her car keys, her mind a chaotic whirl of fear and humiliation. Someone was orchestrating this, someone who knew too much, who wanted her to suffer. Was it Dave, betraying her to save himself? Or worse, was it Alex, playing a game so cruel she couldn't fathom it? She slid into her car, her breath hitching, tears blurring her vision. The world felt like it was closing in, each stranger's glance a potential threat, each whisper a confirmation that her secret was no longer hers. She drove home in a daze, her hands gripping the wheel, her mind racing. The thought of returning to the office, facing those judgmental faces, was unbearable. She needed answers, needed to know who was pulling the strings. But for now, she was trapped, her confidence shattered, her control slipping through her fingers like sand. As she pulled into the driveway, the house loomed dark and empty, a mirror of the void inside her. She sat there, the engine idling, her heart pounding with a single, terrifying certainty. Whoever was doing this wasn't finished. And neither was she. The evening sky hung heavy with the threat of rain, its gray weight pressing down on the city like a lid on a boiling pot. Claire sat alone in her living room, the lights dim, the air thick with the scent of untouched wine and her own spiraling fear. Her hands trembled around the glass she clutched, the red liquid inside sloshing with every unsteady breath. The events of the day, the roses, the card, her explosive confession, played on a relentless loop in her mind, each memory a fresh lash against her fraying sanity. The office had become a crucible, her colleagues' whispers and smirks burning away the last of her carefully crafted facade. She'd screamed her secret to the world, and now it was out, a festering wound exposed to the air. Her phone lay on the coffee table, its screen dark but taunting, as if it held the answers she so desperately needed. She'd tried calling Alex again, hoping for a shred of reassurance, but his curt dismissal still stung. Don't call unless it's important. His voice, sharp and detached, echoed in her head, fueling a gnawing suspicion. Was he behind this? The video call from the factory floor had seemed convincing, his hard hat and the hum of machinery painting a picture of distance and disinterest. But the timing, the precision of these attacks, it felt too orchestrated, too personal. And yet, the alternative was worse. If not Alex, then who? Dave swore he hadn't spoken a word, and despite her fury, she'd seen the panic in his eyes, the kind that didn't lie. Someone else was pulling the strings, and the thought sent a shiver crawling down her spine. She set the wine down, her hands shaking too violently to hold it, and reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen, hesitating before opening a browser. The cursor blinked in the search bar, a silent challenge. She typed psychotherapist near me, the words feeling like a surrender. The screen filled with names, addresses, promises of help, but they blurred through her tears. Was she losing her mind? Were these encounters, those strangers with their cutting words, the roses, the card, real, or was her guilt conjuring them, twisting her perception into a nightmare? She couldn't tell anymore, and that uncertainty was a blade twisting in her gut. Friday morning dawned gray and oppressive, the air heavy with the storm that refused to break. Claire dragged herself out of bed, her body leaden, her eyes burning from sleeplessness. She couldn't face the cafe, couldn't risk another stranger's knowing glance or veiled taunt. She drove straight to the office, her hands gripping the wheel, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and defiance. Work was all she had left, the last anchor in a world slipping out of her control. If she could just focus, bury herself in spreadsheets and emails, maybe she could claw back some semblance of normalcy. The office was quiet when she arrived, the early hour granting her a brief reprieve from her colleagues' stares. She settled at her desk, her fingers flying across the keyboard, the rhythm of typing a fragile lifeline. For a fleeting moment, she felt a flicker of calm, the chaos of the week receding like a tide. But it didn't last. As the office filled, the air shifted, charged with the same undercurrent of curiosity and judgment she'd felt the day before. She kept her head down, her eyes fixed on the screen, but she could feel their glances, hear the low hum of whispers just out of reach. Around noon, she stepped out for a breath of air, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of the office. The street outside was busy, pedestrians weaving through the lunchtime rush, their faces a blur. She clutched a folder of documents to her chest, a shield against the world, and started toward her car. A young man in a hoodie bumped into her, hard enough to send the folder flying. Papers scattered across the pavement, fluttering in the damp breeze like wounded birds. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice quick and smooth as he knelt to help gather them. Claire dropped to her knees, her frustration boiling over. "It's fine," she muttered, her voice strained as she scrambled to collect the papers. "I wasn't paying attention." "No need for verbal thanks," the man said, his tone shifting, a sly edge creeping in. He stood, brushing off his jeans, and flashed a grin that made her blood run cold. "You can thank me by giving me a night with you. I hear you're good at showing appreciation, especially for career favors." Her heart stopped, the world narrowing to the glint in his eyes, the cruel curve of his smile. "What did you say?" she whispered, her voice trembling, her hands frozen around the papers. "You heard me," he said, his grin widening. "I can see it in your eyes. You like rewarding the men who help you out, don't you?" He stepped back, his laughter sharp and mocking, before turning and sprinting down the street, vanishing into the crowd. Claire's vision blurred, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She stood, the folder clutched to her chest, her body shaking with a mix of fury and terror. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. It was a campaign, a deliberate assault on her sanity. Someone was orchestrating this, exposing her secret to strangers, turning her life into a public spectacle. Her knees buckled, and she leaned against a lamppost, the cold metal grounding her just enough to keep her from collapsing. She stumbled back to her car, her mind a storm of fear and rage. The man's words echoed, joining the chorus of taunts that had haunted her all week. How do they know? The question was a scream now, drowning out everything else. She drove home in a haze, her hands trembling on the wheel, her thoughts spiraling into paranoia. Was it Dave, leaking their secret to save himself? Or Alex, playing a game so cruel it defied belief? Or someone else entirely, someone she couldn't see, pulling strings from the shadows? At home, she collapsed onto the couch, her purse falling to the floor, its contents spilling across the carpet. She stared at the ceiling, her breath ragged, her mind racing. The wine glass from the night before sat on the table, its contents dried to a dark stain. She reached for her phone, her hands shaking as she scrolled through her contacts, pausing on Alex's name. She needed to hear his voice, needed to know if he was part of this. But his earlier dismissal stopped her, the memory of his cold tone a fresh wound. Instead, she dialed her therapist's office, her voice barely steady as she booked an emergency appointment for the next day. She couldn't do this alone anymore. That night, she barely slept, her dreams a fractured collage of accusing faces and whispered taunts. By morning, she was a wreck, her eyes hollow, her hands trembling as she dressed for her appointment. The therapist's office was a sterile haven, its beige walls and soft lighting a stark contrast to the chaos in her mind. Dr. Ellis, a calm woman with graying hair and a steady gaze, listened as Claire poured out her story, the strangers, the roses, the office scandal, her own explosive confession. The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered, her voice breaking as she admitted her fear of losing her mind. Dr. Ellis leaned forward, her expression neutral but kind. "Claire, it sounds like you're under immense stress. These encounters, whether they're real or perceived, are triggering a severe emotional response. Have you considered that your guilt over what happened with Dave might be amplifying your perception of these events?" Claire's hands clenched in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. "They're real," she insisted, her voice sharp. These people, they know things. Things I've never told anyone except Dave. And maybe Alex. She hesitated, her suspicion of her husband flaring again. But Alex says he's moved on. He's not even in town. Dr. Ellis nodded, jotting a note. Let's explore that. If someone is orchestrating this, who benefits? And if it's your own perception, we can work on strategies to ground you. Either way, you're not alone in this. The words offered a flicker of comfort, but it was fleeting. As Claire left the office, the weight of her reality settled back over her, heavier than ever. She drove home, her eyes scanning the streets for familiar faces, for anyone who might step out with another cutting remark. The world felt like a minefield, every stranger a potential threat. Across town, Alex sat in a hotel room near the production site, his laptop open, a message from Mia glowing on the screen. Phase 2 complete. She's breaking. Final act tomorrow. He leaned back, a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. Claire's world was crumbling, each encounter a carefully placed domino, falling exactly as he'd planned. He'd played the role of the forgiving husband perfectly, lulling her into a false sense of security. But tomorrow, the final piece would fall, and she'd face the full weight of her betrayal. He closed the laptop, the room's silence wrapping around him like a cloak. Claire thought she'd outsmarted him, but she was about to learn how wrong she was. Back at home, Claire sat in the dark, her phone clutched in her hand, the therapist's words echoing alongside the stranger's taunts. She was teetering on the edge, her control shattered, her life unraveling with every passing hour. Someone was out to destroy her, and she was running out of time to find out who. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the storm outside finally broke, rain lashing against the windows, a mirror of the chaos consuming her. She didn't know it yet, but the worst was still to come. Rain battered the windows, a relentless drumbeat that mirrored the chaos in Claire's mind. She sat in the darkened living room, the house a hollow shell around her, its silence broken only by the storm's fury outside. Her phone lay discarded on the couch, its screen a black void that offered no answers, only more questions. The events of the week, the stranger's taunts, the roses, her public confession, had stripped her bare, leaving her raw and trembling on the edge of sanity. She'd thought she could control her world, that her calculated betrayal of Alex would remain her secret, a single misstep she could bury. But someone had unearthed it, weaponized it, and now her life was unraveling, thread by thread, with no end in sight. She hadn't returned to the office since her outburst, the memory of her colleagues' stares and whispers too raw, too humiliating. Dave had been suspended pending an investigation, his career as tarnished as hers, and the office gossip had spread like wildfire, fueled by her screamed admission. She'd called in sick, claiming a personal emergency, but she knew the truth. She was hiding, cowering in her own home, afraid to face the world that seemed to know her shame. The therapist's words from yesterday, "Are these encounters real, or is your guilt amplifying them?" haunted her, but she clung to the certainty that this was no delusion. Someone was orchestrating her downfall, and the list of suspects had dwindled to one: Alex. His cold dismissal on the phone, his detached demeanor during their last conversation, it all pointed to him. The video call from the factory had seemed convincing, but what if it was a ruse? What if he'd been in the city all along, pulling strings from the shadows? The thought sent a chill through her, her hands trembling as she reached for the wine bottle, its contents nearly gone. She needed to confront him, to demand the truth, but he was still away on his business trip, unreachable until Saturday. The waiting was torture, each hour stretching her nerves tighter, threatening to snap them entirely. Saturday morning arrived, gray and heavy, the storm's remnants leaving the air damp and oppressive. Claire sat at the kitchen table, her eyes bloodshot, her hands wrapped around a cold mug of coffee. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, her body sustained only by adrenaline and fear. The sound of tires on gravel jolted her upright, her heart lurching as she recognized Alex's car pulling into the driveway. He was back. The moment she'd been dreading and craving had arrived. She stood, her legs unsteady, as he stepped through the door, his expression unreadable, his movements calm, deliberate. He set his bag down, his eyes meeting hers briefly before flicking away, as if she were an afterthought. The casualness of it ignited something in her, a spark of rage that burned through her fear. "You," she spat, her voice low and trembling, her hands clenched into fists. You did this, didn't you? You set me up. Alex raised an eyebrow, his face a mask of calm surprise. Claire, what are you talking about? His voice was steady, almost gentle, but there was an edge to it, a cold undercurrent that made her skin prickle. Calm down. I just got home. Don't lie to me, she screamed, stepping closer, her eyes blazing with fury. Those people at the cafe, the flowers, the card, it was you. You wanted to humiliate me, to ruin me. Her voice cracked, tears welling up as she advanced, her hands shaking with the need to make him confess. Alex took a step back, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Claire, you're not making sense. I've been out of town all week. Check the paperwork, call my boss. I didn't do anything. His tone was measured, but his eyes held a glint of something darker, something that made her stomach twist. She lunged for the counter, her hand closing around a kitchen knife, its blade catching the dim light. You think you can destroy me and walk away? She shouted, waving the knife wildly, her voice thick with desperation. You made me a laughingstock. You planned all of it. Alex's eyes widened, but he didn't flinch. He backed away slowly, his voice calm but firm. Claire, put the knife down. You're not thinking clearly. You need help. His hand slipped into his pocket, pulling out his phone, his fingers discreetly dialing 911. You're scaring me. Let's talk this out. Her grip on the knife tightened, her vision blurring with tears and rage. You ruined my life, she screamed, her voice raw, her body trembling. You're a monster, Alex. You wanted me to suffer. Her words dissolved into a chaotic stream of accusations, her mind unraveling as she waved the blade, her movements erratic. The wail of sirens cut through the air, growing louder as police cars screeched into the driveway. Officers burst through the door, their voices sharp and commanding. Drop the weapon. Now. Claire froze, the knife slipping from her trembling fingers, clattering to the floor. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, sobbing as the officers moved in, their hands gentle but firm as they restrained her. Her screams faded into incoherent cries, her face twisted with anguish as they led her out in handcuffs, the rain-soaked gravel crunching under their boots. Alex stood back, his expression a mix of pity and relief, his heart pounding, but his composure intact. He'd played his part perfectly, the grieving husband pushed to the edge by his wife's instability. The police took his statement, their questions brief and sympathetic. He showed them the footage from the home security cameras, Claire brandishing the knife, her eyes wild, her accusations unhinged. It was all the evidence they needed. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed Claire with a severe nervous breakdown, her mental state fractured by the week's relentless pressure. She was admitted for psychiatric evaluation, her career and reputation in tatters, her life reduced to a sterile hospital room and the weight of her own shattered mind. Alex visited once, his face a mask of concern, but his eyes cold, unyielding. He said little, letting her see the divorce papers he'd left on the table, a silent declaration of his victory. While Claire was under care, Alex moved with surgical precision. He met with his lawyer, transferring a significant portion of their joint savings into a private account, untouchable and untraceable. The divorce papers were finalized, each clause a carefully crafted blade to sever her from his life. When Claire returned home, she found the house empty, Alex gone, the only trace of him a stack of documents on the kitchen counter. The divorce agreement was accompanied by a note, its words cold and final, "Don't contact me." You know why? Her fury erupted, a last desperate flare of defiance. She called him, her voice shaking with rage, accusing him of stealing her share of their savings. But Alex was ready, meeting her in a neutral cafe, his demeanor calm, his eyes like ice. "I didn't steal anything, Claire," he said, his voice low, unyielding. "But I have footage of you coming at me with a knife. Attempted murder carries a heavy sentence. Push me, and I'll press charges." Her face paled, the fight draining from her as the reality sank in. She was cornered, her options gone. With no job, no reputation, and no allies, she signed the divorce papers, her hand trembling, her eyes hollow. Dave had been fired, the office scandal a permanent stain on his career as well. Claire was alone, her life a wreckage of her own making, or so she believed. Alex walked away, the weight of his revenge lifting with every step. He'd played the long game, letting Claire's own actions and paranoia fuel her downfall. The event planners had executed his plan flawlessly, each encounter a perfectly placed dart, piercing her confidence, her control, her sanity. He'd been patient, letting her think she held the cards, but in the end, he'd turned her own betrayal against her, leaving her with nothing. As he drove out of the city, the skyline fading in his rearview mirror, Alex felt a strange calm settle over him. The storm had passed, the air clear, the weight of his marriage gone. Claire had thought she could betray him and walk away unscathed, but she'd underestimated him. He'd given her a lesson she'd never forget, a masterclass in consequences. Now, he was free, his future unwritten, the ghosts of his past left behind in the ruins of her life.